My name is Naomi. I'm a vaginologist, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance of closing the birth field, also called a rebirth, also called, well, sometimes called closing the bones, but actually there's more to it than just closing the bones in this space that I'm referring to. There's loads of ways that we can refer to it, and they kind of mean similar things. Basically, what we're talking to is the importance of having a moment to come back into the acknowledgement that we have given birth and moved into a different archetypal space. So from moving from essentially like the maiden era, the archetype of maiden, into mother, how can we land with a more gentle, more of a feather bed situation? That's what we're really speaking to. And closing the birth field enables the body, the mind, the soul to transition gently. So first and foremost, what I'm referring to here? What is the closing of the birth field? How I work with closing of the birth field is how we would be working with the vagina, and we're working with the body, and we're working with the womb in order to move into a completely different energetic and physical space. What this looks like is working first and foremost with the emotional holding that exists by having a conversation around what happened at the birth. Now, what's really important to note here is that this birth could have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 weeks ago, 10 days ago. It is all warranted, because what happens is if we have not closed the birth field, the portal remains open and it confuses the body and the mind into everything that's gone on, because we haven't had time to acknowledge with it everything that's happened. And so if you're somebody, or you know somebody who still gets teary around the birth that they had, still feels like they haven't had the chance to reconcile the birth, or still feels there's an element of grief over the birth, then there is still something there in the body to be worked with. And also to note that this doesn't mean that there is a babe at the end of it. This could have been a miscarriage, this could have been an abortion, and this could have been a live birth, this could have been a C-section, this could have been a vaginal birth. It doesn't matter what form the birth takes. If that portal has been opened, it's important to acknowledge it and work with it. What we're essentially doing is working with the memory and the sensations and the feelings that come up around having been through the birth portal in whatever form that takes. And it's such an important space to have, especially in today's society, where the mother is not given the space and time as much as she needs. Sometimes there's a unicorn situation where somebody has been given all the time, all the space, and been offered several offers of having time to discuss everything that happened. But oftentimes there hasn't been that space given, and there is the problem. We're also in a time where intervention is high for births, where there is more and more intervention with miscarriages, and also where there is little time in a hospital environment be cared for and tended to, and in home environments there's less and less of a village to support somebody. What's important is that we acknowledge that the person has been through the portal, and we work with closing that portal and allowing ourselves to land. If we don't allow ourselves to land, then essentially what happens is there's an element of discombobulation, and it can manifest physically or emotionally further down the line. So what I have seen, and why I'm speaking to this, and why I'm really, really passionate about this, is because what I see in spaces with clients is somebody will come to me with a physical manifestation. So it could be not the inability to orgasm, and that has happened since birth. It could be painful sex. It could be just feeling generally not themselves. It could be postnatal depression that's continued on. There could be a whole host of challenges, and they tend to start with the pelvis. And this is because even if the person's given birth 10 years prior, if they haven't had the time to acknowledge that birth, it will still tend to come up, and then it becomes this physical or emotional manifestation. So what happens in the space. It's really important to acknowledge everything that happens so that people are aware. And so essentially what happens is that we first of all come into communication around the body and with the body. And what we're looking for is to see what's ready to be moved through. Nothing ever is moved through if it's not ready. The body knows. So we talk to the challenges that are currently coming up. Physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever they may be. And in my space, I have a really in-depth form. So a client comes to me and they fill out this really beautiful long form that gives them time to reflect on their journey and asks a lot of questions that perhaps they may not have really previously considered before. Then after this, what we do is we come into a session of acknowledgement of what's being held. And so this can look like just talking. This could look like talking alongside somatic work. So nervous system led somatic work with breath, moving things through the body somatically. What I love is to really acknowledge the pendulum swing of the nervous system within this space. So we come into deep work and then we come back into our bodies. We're very much in our heads and we come back into the body. And we're allowing ourselves to swing in this pendulum-like movement when we work together. And it's a gift because that's how life is. That's how the nervous system is in general. In day-to-day life, it's the swinging of fight or flight, shit, I've got to get this done, or I've got to get through this, versus I'm now coming back into my body and I feel very much at a point where I can be with my thoughts and emotions and just gently moving through life, back into the freeze response, so being in that dorsal response, back into the parasympathetic response, back into fight and flight, back into parasympathetic. And that is essentially what can happen in these spaces, is that what we're doing is we're attending to what's ready. So what we end up doing is potentially being in a fight or flight, tending to it, being with it, or the dorsal or the freeze, and we're moving it through. We're dancing with it, and then we move it through and we come back into the parasympathetic. And when we're working in that space, it's really important to liken that to how it is anyway day to day. And so then what happens is that when we've had a session, then we will be moving into the physical session. And I have a ceremonial space that I work in, and it's called a closing of the bones, or it's sometimes called the rebirth or closing of the birth field. But what I do is I basically weave in all of my training into this magical space. So somebody would start with a steam, and this steam allows the body to come into a space of parasympathetic relaxation and allows the steam to go to the areas that the pelvis is ready to be touched with, and then allows for sometimes feelings and sensations to come up. Oftentimes there's a cry, oftentimes there's a deep sense of being held, often there's a spiritual connection, and what it allows is for us to be in a time and space to gently be together and acknowledge that we're working with the pelvis, and for us to say hi to the pelvis for probably the first time in a very, very long time in this deep ceremonial space. And then somebody would come to me for a full massage where we're working with the spine, we're working carefully into the coccyx, and as soon as I'm in the coccyx, I'm aware of the holding pattern in the pelvis and in the vagina straight away, and whether this feels like a full-bodied yes to be going into the vagina. We turn around, and once we're there and we're soothing the body, we're soothing the nervous system, we're soothing the ventral nerve, the vagus nerve, then we move into working with the breath, so end up working with the muscles around the breath and how this is holding the breath. So we're working with the diaphragm, we're working with the diaphragm holding pattern. Then we work into the belly, and then we work with the womb. This is when we would deeply check in with each other and we decide together whether we feel ready to work with the vagina's holding pattern. And what we're doing in the vagina is we're working with a fascia release. Fascia is what holds on to emotions and memories and challenges, and we're working with the fascia to be with what's coming up. I then come into this role of vaginologist. What am I doing? Well, I'm tuning into the energy of the space and I'm reading the vagina. I'm coming into the way that the pattern is in the vagina. Is there something tight? Is there no connection at all? So there's completely numb. Is there a area that feels like gritty? And then I'm able to tune into what's being held there through careful questioning. When I'm questioning, the person, then the person's able to speak to what's being held, and then we're able to move this through the body through release. And the release is different each time. This could be a physical release just with me working the fascia. This could be tears. This could be laughs. This could be moving into a shaking. So it just varies. And what we're essentially doing is repatterning how the fascia is holding. And once we've come back from the right to the left, the masculine and the feminine, and we come back to the center, we close the field physically with the finger, physically with the breath, and then we exit. And there is more steps within it, but that would be a moment of us checking in and you being part of the process with me. But essentially then what happens is that we rebozo wrap the body. We come into this tight rebozo wrapping and we allow ourselves to just integrate the whole experience. And after this, the way that we then dance with life will change. And that is why I believe that everybody deserves this time and place. This is, for me, a 3-hour ceremony, and this is available on my website. The link will be in the comments below. And I hope this really explains to and speaks to everything that's entailed in that space. But I'm here for all questions, further support, further clarification. And I just feel that it takes time to acknowledge the birth that someone's still holding on to. But it's sometimes super obvious for someone that it's still the birth that's an issue. It could have been one midwife that's still on your mind. It could have been one yes, one no that you so wish that you didn't consent to. It could be someone that you did not consent to something happening. Oh, just a little sweep. Super common, not acceptable. Something that the body remembers and fears moving forward. And also the fact that you have literally allowed for a birth to happen and then we haven't allowed for that space to close. That is so important, especially so if you're somebody that's still teary around it, as I said, or perhaps on a conception journey. If you're on a conception journey and you are struggling to conceive, or you are about to go on a conception journey and you know that there's been an abortion in the past, a miscarriage in the past, or there's been other challenges with the pelvis in the past, it's so important that we come back to the fascia and come back to the holding pattern in the vagina. It's the key. I'm sending so much love.